right, good evening. The time is now 5 o'clock on February 21st, 2023, and it's time to call the public safety meeting to order. Ms. Patterson, will you please note attendance for the record?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Benson, Councilmember Watson requested an excused absence for the meeting tonight. Unless you have any concerns, I'd like to see that excused.
Fine.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Benson, having reviewed the agenda, are there any questions or concerns?
None. No.
Okay. In that case, I'll take the agenda as approved. The next item is public comment. I don't see any folks that are in council chambers this evening. I will quickly check and see if there is anyone available on Zoom. I note that there is one attendee who appears to be the city attorney. If we could promote him to a panelist, that would be great. Thank you. With that, since there does not seem to be any public comment this evening, we will move on to the next item, which is Agenda Bill 23-032, Vehicle Trespass. Chief Phipps.
Good afternoon. I'm going to try and do the best I can with this vehicle trespass ordinance proposal. It was initially proposed and worked on by Captain Lynch. He is enjoying a vacation, so I'm going to do the best I can. So obviously, I think there's a need that we've demonstrated just by our data, which I'll identify here in a second, that our current resources that we have to hold people accountable for being in a stolen vehicle is not really a resource for us. King County Sheriff's jail system, prosecutors are the ones that really decide who they file against, whether they file or don't file. And in our case, we have had over the last 2 years significant increase in vehicle thefts. From 2020, we had 7 vehicle thefts compared to 31 this last 2022. So that's a significant increase. And recovered vehicles in our city, meaning that maybe that somebody brought that stolen vehicle into our community. They may have stolen another vehicle, or they were visiting somebody, but anyway, we recovered that vehicle, and we went from 13 in 2021 to 30. So it's a significant, between those two, there's a 20, and it's increased to 61. So almost over 3 times increase over that period. And in submitting those, when we do get somebody in custody or identified a suspect, we submit that to the King County Prosecutor's Office for filing. And we have had, it's common that they get rejected based on some information that they require. They require that somebody in a stolen vehicle has knowledge that they knowingly drive the vehicle knowing that it's stolen. And that's a difficult thing to prove, even though we have a specific case, just as an example, in which the subject was driving the stolen vehicle, the window was broken, the steering column was broken out and hot wired, and they rejected it, saying that there wasn't enough information, facts to show that that person knowingly was driving a stolen vehicle. So that, based on that difficulty, we became aware that Issaquah had developed a city ordinance regarding trespassing, vehicle trespassing, and in reviewing theirs, they had some success with our local prosecutor in prosecuting people in a stolen vehicle. In fact, we contacted our local prosecutor, who stated that in fact it has been successful. The only thing that she would recommend us doing differently would be, instead of having it as a misdemeanor, which is lower than the gross misdemeanor. A gross misdemeanor gives it the ability to file easier instead of having additional charges to file. So her recommendation was, instead of having it go through as a misdemeanor, but to bring it up to a gross misdemeanor. And there's a significant change in that, just a misdemeanor is 90 days and $1,000 max fine. 90 days, $1,000. Gross misdemeanor is $5,000 and 364 days. So there's a more significant penalty, if you will, but she also states that because of the significance of the additional crime of gross misdemeanor, that she's easily able to file those against, besides the misdemeanor. So that would be my recommendation, even though in the agenda bill it states misdemeanor. I would go forward with the gross misdemeanor.
Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Benson.
What is the? I mean, you just talked about the penalties, the difference in penalties between a misdemeanor and a gross misdemeanor, but what are the thresholds generally that would make a crime leap from misdemeanor to gross misdemeanor?
It's defined in the RCW. The RCW defines that, whether it's a gross misdemeanor, felony, it's identified through the RCW.
And you don't recall the difference in wording between misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor in that code?
No, they just identify that if the possession of a stolen vehicle is gross, well, as a RCW, it's actually a felony in the RCW. They identify that, so that's legislation sets that. The legislature.
Okay, I'm not opposed to this idea. I just would like to, understand. Obviously, I don't want to get a Juris Doctorate here, but I'd like to understand how it's determined between. Man, I wish we had like a legal guy we could ask.
Would you like
Do they
to
have like
direct it to
do they have
the
like
city
one of
attorney?
those law talking dudes who nobody? All right, skip it then, I guess. Oh wait,
City attorney, would you like to address it?
Well, sure. Just the definition I think the chief's referring to is where it prescribes the penalties, but it doesn't define it as, something is a misdemeanor if it does A, B, C, or D. It's just that the legislature then characterizes typically certain types of offenses as felonies, class A, B, C, misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor. Likely on a policy judgment about the relative seriousness and the need for incarceration or monetary penalties. So
then I'm using hyperbole only so that I can understand. If we decided that there was a real problem with bubblegum thievery in Snoqualmie, and we decided we've got to put a stop to this, could the city of Snoqualmie, could we decide that stealing a pack of gum is now no longer a misdemeanor? It's a gross misdemeanor.
I believe you could, because the cities have jurisdiction over those, the ability to prosecute those types of crimes. Felonies are prosecuted by the county. So if the city council classified something as a felony, first you need to be consistent with generally with state law and how it approaches those things, and B, the prosecution decisions are made, as the chief outlined, by the felony. So if the council defined something in a way that the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office wasn't going to charge, it wouldn't have much of an impact, which is really why we find ourselves here tonight on this in the first place, I think.
And now, is there any kind of, for these kinds of cases, is there any kind of arbitrary and capricious sort of wording with regard to the choices that councils make on these sorts of distinctions between misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, that kind of thing?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Generally not, other than that the statute does say anything that's not classified as a felony or a misdemeanor is a gross misdemeanor. But that's just really a definitional catch-all.
City Attorney Sturbank, it's my understanding that Renton and Auburn also have similar law on the books. Do we know whether they've classified it as a gross misdemeanor or a misdemeanor?
I do not. The chief may know. I can take a quick look as the committee's discussing.
Okay.
Do we have any sort of indicator in these cities that have done this, the kind of impact that it's made on car theft?
I do not have that, although the prosecutor in Issaquah stated that they have had success with this, but as far as the number, I'm not sure. I don't know that.
Okay. Chief, you mentioned that there, I think, were 13 vehicles that were, 31 vehicles that were stolen in 2022. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And how many of those were referred to King County for charges?
We had 7 declines from the King County Prosecutor's Office regarding possession of a stolen vehicle. I do not have the information about how many times we submitted, nor do I have what I think is most important, is did we have any successful filings on that as well. That's something that we were looking into today and didn't get the time to get that done.
Okay. I think that information would be really helpful if we had that over the last couple of years. I think my general feeling on this is that I'd like to see it go forward, but I'd like to see a little bit more information. Oops, City Attorney, did you want to comment?
Sure. Just City of Renton classifies vehicle trespass as a misdemeanor. And what was the second city? Did you say Bureau?
It's my understanding that Auburn
Auburn? Just a moment.
has also done it.
And did you say Redmond or Renton?
Renton.
Renton, okay. Is there any downside to doing this?
All it really does is give us a resource to hold somebody accountable. But ultimately, it allows us to send it to our local prosecutor to prosecute that crime instead of having to go through King County Prosecutor's Office. We just are not having success in that avenue. So that's what this really does. It allows us to hold somebody accountable for it.
So you're trying to deter crime. Okay. And it's just a novel approach nowadays.
So my inclination on this one, again, I'd like to see it going forward. I would like to see a little bit more analysis to the extent that we can get the additional facts that you identified, Chief. I think that would be really helpful, just in terms of how many were actually referred, as well as what happened. And then I'm assuming that if we wanted to go ahead and continue forwarding matters to King County for review to see whether they'd go ahead and prosecute it going forward, we can still do that. But to the extent that they say no, we can choose to prosecute on our own. Is that accurate?
It's true.
I guess one of the other things that would be nice is that we can keep an eye on the budget, I'm assuming, as well. In terms of additional costs for going after these. So I think my preference would be to have this come back to public safety in 2 weeks to see if we can get some additional information on that. I'd also love to see if we could get some additional information, just kind of laying out just briefly the difference, so that it's easier for when it goes to council, for them to understand the difference between a gross misdemeanor and a misdemeanor. And I guess if we have any additional information on whether it's been helpful in the other jurisdictions that have pushed forward, but I think it's a great idea, and I would like to see it go forward. Councilmember Benson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We will
Does that sound appropriate?
And
Thank you, Chief.
and Captain Lynch will be doing it, who's done all the research, so he'll be able to answer every question. I'm sure that you guys have.
Perfect. Thank you. City Attorney, did you have something else?
yeah, just to round out the answers, Auburn also classifies it as a misdemeanor.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So in that case, the next item on the agenda is discussion item. It's AB 23-026, the quarterly fire accreditation report.
sure to bring that up. There we go. So this is what we've done a couple of times this year. Just delayed a little bit this quarter. Our meeting was canceled in January. I just wanted to go through some of the highlights, just to kind of point out some of the interesting information I think that had changed this year. Scroll down to the work plan, which a couple pages in. Yep, keep going. One more page from that. There we go. So you'll see the red sections there. Those are two that were passed on to this year that we're going to address this year. Although the department is making a 2023 work plan for the whole department, this is part of our strategic planning. One of those is we still plan to engage the local businesses in a welcome wagon type program to provide info to the fire about the fire department, some of the classes and the things that we provide. And then also, once that's in place, we could roll it out to some of the other departments in the city if they want to tag in police department and public works and so on. And the other one is creating a standard to provide builders and developers with some specific fire protection guidance for as they're creating new buildings in the city. Whether that's a sprinkler ordinance down the road or just some things that they need to address when they're putting in for new buildings. Scrolling to the next page, we have our incidences for this year. And as you can see, the green line there is for 2022. The highest we've ever had, 1611 is where we ended up. Yes.
Hey, I just had a couple quick questions going back to the
sure.
goals. Sorry about that. One of the ongoing items is described as policy sharing Knox keys with Falls City and Eastside Fire and Rescue.
Yeah, Knox keys are what we have. All the buildings or most of the businesses in the city of Snoqualmie have a little box outside, just like they do here on the city hall. Inside, we're the only ones that have a key for that, and inside there is a key access to the building. So that way, if we're there when it's after hours, we don't have to bust in windows, things like that, to get access. Up until now, each department has had their own separate key. So it's been a little bit problematic when we're on another call, say they come into our area or vice versa. So last year we created a policy where all three of the departments, Falls City, Eastside, and Snoqualmie, shared our keys. We secured them on our rig, so they're still secure. But that way, if they come in and do a fire alarm here in the city while we're maybe doing something else, they'd be able to access it.
Okay.
So again, it's a policy basically to allow for the keys to be shared, and then talks about how they should be checked every week to make sure they're still there, as well as how they should be locked up on the rigs.
Okay. Any concerns in light of the mailbox key thefts about having
the Knox keys are very secure.
Okay.
Like I said, they're only the issue you could have is if you lost a key, then in theory somebody would be able to open it up and get into the city. But for one, they would have to know what that key is, what it means, because it's not marked as in Snoqualmie Master Access Key or anything like that.
Okay.
But that has been an issue in the past. Some departments are switching to an electronic version of those Knox keys, but that's a fairly expensive process to redo everything, have them rewired. But some departments are going that direction. But it is a fairly secure. That's why we actually have to mark on a check sheet that we have it every morning.
Okay.
The crews check it, so it's more secure than just a mailbox lock for better words.
Okay, sounds good. And then my other question, objective 1C4, cited to obtaining a light duty fire suppression rapid response vehicle. I understand that's on hold right now, since the fire department's going forward on the ladder truck and the fire engine replacement. But can you just briefly touch on what that type of a vehicle would look like? It's different than a brush truck, I'm assuming, right?
It's different than a brush truck. This strategic plan was created 5 years ago, or just under 5 years.
Okay.
And so at the time, that was one of the things they brought up, is in maybe we needed something that was smaller that could get around to tighter areas, that has a little bit better access. So that's what that's from. Since then, we've already, obviously, like you said, switched different directions. We've gone after the ladder truck or the fire engine, the new fire engine first. From what I understand, the strategic plan will be coming up again this year. I believe we're gonna be doing it in conjunction with the rest of the city, and so there'll probably be some new established priorities. So I don't know if that one's really anything that it's not the forefront. I think
Okay.
a brush truck, if, when you're looking at priorities, obviously the engine that we have on order is our first priority. How we're gonna fund the second replacement engine down the road, as well as the ladder truck, I think is probably, and the brush truck are all probably right in there.
Okay.
My guess is probably in the next year or two, you're gonna hear Chief Carrera talking about some of the benefits of how we could utilize a brush rig per se, how that could benefit the city. That might be the next one that comes up, but
Okay.
I'm not sure the exact plans on that one. But yeah, the light one that it mentions in the objectives is not something I think that we're interested in at this time, or it benefits the city.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, so back to the incidences. So you can see 1611 by far is higher than we've ever had. There's that one little spike there in 21. I think that was right as we came out of COVID and everybody was enjoying being back outdoors again. But other than that, we're way above where we have been in the past. And that's probably can be attributed to, I think we've talked before about how we're responding. Some of the responses that we've gone into North Bend has increased that. With how we're responding, helping them out, with how they change their run cards. I believe Chief Carrera talked about it last meeting. So, yeah, 1611 is where we ended up. It's a little blurry there, you can't see it. Any other questions about our instances this year? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the line graph, and looking at 2019 kind of as the last normal year. But then 2021 was greater than 2019 every month, except for, well, in most of the months, and then the 2022 line was greater than 2021 in all but 3 months. So are we somehow thinking that have we peaked? Are we thinking that this is the as bad as it gets? Because if the trend continues, then well, I mean, if you just look at the numbers trend, we could be looking at 1,900 incidents this year.
I wouldn't be surprised. We're going to keep going up, I think. I mean, you can look at it, obviously, in the beginning part of the year, the numbers are lower, and then it gets bigger for all years as it gets toward the summer months. That's when we're the busiest. 2021, even into 22, was a little bit affected by COVID, but really, you can see where, 21 and into 22, why it's higher than everything. A lot of that goes back to when, like I said, the response card changed with Eastside in regards to them taking, they had that aid car that was in service up at the casino for a little while. They had to take that offline because of staffing issues. And so we responded more as a backup into North Bend, and they went to a model of the closest unit, which is obviously best for the public, as in the closest unit response. So instead of bringing up a rig from Issaquah a lot of the time, we would be, if there's a second aid call in North Bend, we would be the backup. And it's something that Chief Carrera is planning on addressing this year. We've had some other projects that we've been working on, but he's mentioned that one of his priorities is talking or sitting down and talking with Eastside again about how those numbers are starting to really creep up, and there's more times that we're in North Bend, and figuring out strategies to have them bring up a unit to back up in Snoqualmie when we're out on one of their calls, or how to rebalance that mutual aid aspect so that it might be more in line, so that making sure that we're still covered.
Are there any
something he's going to be addressing this year?
So 1,900 seems like a lot, but have you guys, do you have estimates on what your actual capacity is?
I don't know off the top of my head. Chief Carrera does have some stats that talk about unit reliability in regards to how often it's available versus how often it's out on another call. There's those double calls, and he can bring that back probably at a further meeting and talk more about it. I just don't have those numbers in front of me, and he's the data expert, and he'd be able to kind of answer that a little bit better as to they call it unit reliability, but it has to do with how often a unit is available versus how often a call comes in and it's on another call. I would be surprised if it would go up as high as 1,900 this year, but I would assume that it's going to be 17, probably 17 or 18, a lot of times, you know, it spikes. We wouldn't have been 1611 if we wouldn't have had that big storm near the end of December. We would have been under 16, but you know, it kind of ebbs and flows. But everything you've seen is it's going to continue to keep trending up until we work a little bit on solving some of that mutual aid piece.
So it'll be good as long as nothing happens.
Well, I mean, you can kind of look at some of those spikes and talk about when they, you know, a lot of those can be pointed, or if you drilled it down even smaller, you can point to actual, like I said, storms or things like that were the cause of some of those.
I don't know. I'm just looking at June, July, August, or I guess it's July, August, September of this last year were the big spikes, and then I can see the ice storm there that you're talking about.
The ice storm, yeah, the June, July, all those in the 160s, those are high. Those are, you know, pretty close to the highest we've had months of any of the years that we've been keeping track of it. And again, that just happens to, you know, as all everybody's getting busier, more residents in North Bend, everything just keeps going up.
Yeah, because I mean, they keep on developing. Well, everybody wants to keep developing. So, I mean, at what point I guess the real question is, at what point do we need another fire department?
And there were some, I mean, we've had some internal discussions about some ways to potentially look at, you know, the next option I think would be maybe some kind of a daytime aid car who could be also used for staffing for fires if we need it, but maybe a daytime aid car that would be able to handle some of these transports. I have been tasked with this year starting to look into that type of a program, maybe through a part-time using volunteers first, seeing how it works, seeing what kind of call volume it has, and then eventually down the road, that would probably be the next step that maybe we'd be coming back to council in the next budget cycle saying, hey, here's some data that we've shown about reliability and how this part-time aid car has worked, where maybe we might be asking for some more staffing. But that's, you know, down the road. Our capacity can handle it for right now, but when it gets up to, like you're saying, 18, 19, we're gonna have to look at, you know, can we really just handle it with one unit? Are we gonna need, and a lot of times it has to do with transporting. We transport somebody outside the city, the aid car's gone for an hour at least, if not longer, depending on where they go. And then that's when we have to, you know, when we're having some of those gaps in coverage. So if we can have an aid car that is available to do those transports, still leaving a unit here in the city, I think that's going to be the next step probably. Like I said, that's forecasting ahead. That's probably the next place that the department is going to want to go, staffing wise. But it's not anything that's on the forefront. Like I said, maybe the next budget cycle would be something where it might be, you know, maybe brought forward. But again, this is all just, you know, kind of looking ahead, nothing that we're planning for right now.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered your question.
And yeah, no, it does answer my question. I don't have the knowledge that you have on this or the background on the numbers. That the aid car idea, that doesn't seem to you like a, you know, a Band-Aid on a severed limb. It feels like a real useful response.
It all depends on the call volume, and you can look and see when we're the busiest, and having a daytime aid car based on, you know, like I said, it's kind of the next step. Can the department use another, you know, fully staffed engine or aid car? Sure, but you know, it's incremental steps that we need to get there.
Or looking at this graph,
with our budget, things like that. It is
maybe it's like a seasonal thing.
Of something that, you know, it's definitely something that Chief and I have been looking at and kind of planning out, but it's, you know, like I said, it's not necessarily ready for prime time yet, but we are tracking how often we're going out on calls, our increased call volume. More importantly, and I'll talk a little bit when I get to the fire inspections, the workload of our current firefighting force and how busy they are with projects. That is something that we're going to have to look at in the future if we do need some more staffing. But so we are tracking all of that.
Okay. I guess it, yeah, it'd be great to hear about those ideas, because summer's coming, and you know, if there was some kind of aid car idea or something affordable that we could do to figure out ways to support you guys during the busiest part of the year, it'd be great to get that in motion.
Yeah, one thing that we're trying, like I said, I've been tasked with is putting together, using our current volunteer force, because right now they usually only sign up one at a time for a shift. Maybe they sign up at one. we're going to pilot a program where they sign up together and can provide that transport aid car. So we just started to do that this month. So I believe there's one time this month and there's a couple times in March where they've signed up double to where they're going to be able to be available for transport. And that's where I was talking about, we're going to use that kind of as a pilot program to see how maybe that affects some of our unit reliability so that we can track that. And then possibly later in the year, we might be coming back with the part-time program, maybe trying to get in some other firefighters specifically for that piece of having that aid car, seeing how that works. And then that's where I'm saying, if we have the data that proves that it's helping with our reliability and having units available, that's where it's going to point to be able to come back and say, hey, here's the problem, this is how we can fix it, this data shows that having more staffing could increase our reliability. Here's some solutions how we can approach that. That's kind of the track we're looking at. But the first step is to look at how having that volunteer aid car impacts our response numbers. The next one there is just the incidents, and scrolling down just a little bit more so we can see that bottom graph. That just talks about the types of incidences. Again, because we've had more calls, all of the numbers have gone up. For example, we had 58% of our calls were EMS. We ended the year at 59%. So at the beginning of the year, we ended at 58%. Some of the other ones to highlight there, the false alarm calls went up from 7% to 9.5%. Those are like AFAs, automatic fire alarms. And our good intent, our service calls were up from 22% to 25%. So again, as all the calls go up, the percentage has gone a little bit higher of the types of calls. Yes?
What exactly falls under good intent?
Good intent would be service calls, for example, a tree in the road that we have to cut down to get access. Maybe somebody calls for a welfare check. Good intent also covers things like smoke investigation. Somebody thinks somebody's burning illegally in their backyard. Those are all kind of categorized into the good intent area. And then the bottom graph there just talks about our mutual aid given and received. And again, we ended the year at 38.8% aid given, the times that we go out to somebody else, and we started the year at 35%. So that's creeping up again too, and that just points again to what we were saying. The data is showing that we're running more in the North Bend, and we need to look at ways how we can solve that, which we're working on. Next, if we just scroll through our performance measures, one more page, please. I know it's kind of blurry there, so we can see the bottom there. Our percent time for how often we're getting out the door, you can see there in the far right column, it's we started out 138, 136, 139, 139. That's how long it takes us to get out the station when there's a call. That's one of the things we track. You can see that it's all staying really consistent, which is really good. That when we first started tracking it, it was up in the 40s, the 50s, so we've actually brought that number down. So we're staying pretty consistent there. And then scroll to the next page. At the very bottom of the next page where it has the graphs. This is just another example of the data. You can see we started out the year, so this is how long it takes us to get to a call, whether it's our call, whether it's outside of the city. So you can see that we started the year at 10:55 and we ended the year at 14:55. And that again just points to more often that the reason why it's taking longer to get to calls is because we're having to drive further to Fall City or to North Bend to get to a call. So you can again see how that data is showing that things are creeping up because the times that we're responding into North Bend. We do also Fall City, but the majority of the time is with North Bend. Scrolling in the next page, it talks about fire inspections. This just goes, you can go down to where, keep going. There we go. The orange top part is the same, but you can see again when it talks about year to date for end of last year, 2022, we ended up with 381 inspections. That's the inspections that the crews are going out doing for all the businesses. That's actually a little bit lower. We didn't get all of our goal is to get them all done in the year. We didn't get them all done by the end of the year just because of some of the staffing challenges we had and bringing on the new probationary firefighters. A lot of the focus was getting them trained. The crews didn't get out to get those inspections. But the good news is the ones that we did miss, we picked up in January of this year. So we're all caught up. All of the ones that are occupied, all of the high-risk facilities have been inspected as of the end of January. There's still a couple that have to do re-inspections, or maybe there's some buildings that don't have a current occupant, but all the ones that are occupied have been inspected by the end of January of this year. And then last is just the property loss here. And just to point out, we had one fire in near the end of December, and that was actually at Smoky Joe's, and it was just a interior fire from them using torch to heat up their pipes to keep them from freezing. It was during the cold snap that we had, and that caused some of the paneling, some of the stuff to burn behind the wall to catch on fire. So it was only a $2,000 loss. You can see, scroll down and we can see the annual property saved. So this, you can see our number. So our total on the side there is, based on the fires that we had in the city for last year, we had roughly $31 million of property at risk. We saved 30,627,000. So that came out to about 98.45%, which is really good. And a lot of that, some of that was based on the fact that we had two commercial businesses that had fires in them. The Cascade Elementary and the golf course. One was 16 million, one was 11 million, but they were very minor damage. I think it was in the 2, 3, 4,000 range for each one. So because of that, that kind of skewed the numbers a little bit, but we did have 1, 2, 3, we had 4, 5 house fires in the city. But again, just to run through this, it's not on that slide, but you know, for example, we had a house that was at 560,000, only had $150,000 of damage. One that was a little over 1 million, 300,000. One that was 1.6, 450,000 of damage, and then the one that was at 635 that had 31,000 of damage. So what I wanted to point that out is because I think it's important. We have these big buildings that are on fire, but we're not losing them. We're not losing, you know, we're getting the crews there quick. They're doing a good job, that we're keeping the fires small. And so even though it might be a $1 million house and there's $300,000 of loss, that's a very small fire compared to what it could be if it was completely, you know, gutted. And that just goes to show that, you know, we're doing a really good job at getting the fires out before they have a chance to spread to the rest of the house. So, you know, I wanted to point out that, you know, although the 98% number is a little high because of those two high, you know, businesses, it still does go to point that we're doing a really good job on the fires that we do have. Okay, that was the last that I wanted to point out. Any other questions about the report? Yes.
So just for confirmation on your last point, sorry. So you said it was 2 commercial fires, or was it 3?
It was, well, 2 commercial
There's the 2
large
initial
fires.
and
I
then
was
Smoky
thinking of
Joe's.
Cascade,
Yeah.
Elementary, and the golf course. There was a 3rd commercial one, which I just talked about, that happened in December, which was Smokies. But I was thinking about just those high $16, $17 million as to why I kind of turned the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, so those were the only 2 that we had. There were 3 really that were commercial, but the majority were the house fires.
Okay, thank you. Any further?
No, that's great.
And then one other thing just to point out with accreditation, just because it's happening next week, is this year in 2024 is when we're going to go in front of the commission and get reaccredited. It's going to be in March of 2024. You guys are going to be involved with that as we go throughout the year. You're going to be hearing some of it. We're going to have a team out probably December or January of next year that's going to go through all of our documentation and get us reaccredited. Part of that process is myself, Chief Carrera, and also Captain Phelps serves as peer assessors for other departments. I'm actually going to be going out to this next week. I'm going to be in Florida for an accreditation conference that's the same conference we'd be going to next year. Probably some of the public safety committee is going to be invited to when we get our reaccreditation. So I'm going to that conference the end of this next week. But then a month from now, in March, I'm going to be going to Clovis, California, to be doing the same thing for their department, spending a week. They're providing you know, they're funding it, but doing the same thing where we're going out, going over all those documentations. So myself, Chief Carrera also has one this year. He's going to be going to somewhere in North Carolina. I can't remember the name of it. But you know, it's part of giving back. We go out and evaluate other departments. They're going to come and evaluate, you know, other departments come and evaluate us. So as we're going through the year, you're going to keep hearing more about as we're preparing for these accreditation visits at the end of the year.
Sounds like a great idea, especially since you can see what they're doing and what's working well versus not.
It's a great experience because we have to do the same thing, but going out, seeing other departments, seeing how they respond to the performance indicators, but just also seeing how other departments do things, and then you can bring that information back. This will be my second visit. I believe Chief Carrera's gone on 2, maybe 3, and I know Captain Fouts has gone on 4 or 5. So every time we learn something new that we can bring back to our department, say, hey, here's a real good way that they're showing their data on something, or maybe here's a really good program that you're using, and then we adopt it ourselves. So it's a win-win for both of us. You know, not only are we helping other departments get accredited, but we're also getting a chance to kind of get out and see how other people are handling the same accreditation module.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We are now in discussion item 4, which is the legislative update. Chief Phipps?
Once again, legislative update. As you know, I've talked about this before. I've been involved in the discussions and talking with our legislators to try and influence, if you will, the direction that it goes, to maybe try and get some solutions to some of the issues. And I know you have as well signed papers of support, and that was much appreciated. Specifically on the pursuit bills, I know that, believe it or not, there was a lot of influence. 263 people, cities signed up or signed on to support some of those bills regarding pursuits, and there's no doubt that that influenced the process. As we know, that was one of the most difficult discussions going forward, that really restricted law enforcement and what we can do and how we can do it. And there was a big push from both sides to, one, keep it the way it is, status quo, and the other one to really open it up and say, you know, law enforcement needs to have some kind of ability to chase some of these vehicles. And out of the legislative bills that were introduced, there's only one left, that is HB 1363, and it did have amendments to it. And I know that I responded to an email that you had put out regarding the support for 2 different ones, and they were different in one specific area, and that was, one of them really put everything on hold, status quo, for literally until October of 2024. And so we would have to really live like we are and do business like we do now for an extended amount of time. Whereas as the one 1363, which was supported by WASPIC, which is a Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs, is basically said, let's change that now and then have a work group. Well, the one that's still in play has a work group that is going to be developed to evaluate successes, different ways of doing it. That is still being legislated. In fact, Thursday they were still talking about it in committee, but it did get passed through committee 7-2, which was interesting because, as you know, the majority in that committee are from the Democratic Party, and yet they knew that there had to be a change. So there's no doubt that the signing of support for this by the cities and the mayors and the council members had a big influence on that. So we do have one bill going forward. We look forward to maybe still working on that, but it's better than the status quo. We're excited about that. The juvenile access to an attorney was a big one that I don't know if it got as much traction as we had hoped. Our concern was, if you recall, access to an attorney was anytime that you make contact with a juvenile and it's regarding a criminal case, you would actually have to advise them, more than just advise them, you'd have to contact an attorney for them before you can ask any questions or talk to them. And in reality, what we found is that because of that, it probably put more juveniles in the criminal justice system than was hoped, because when you have a situation, you couldn't resolve it right then. Like maybe there was a reason why they did what they did or something to that effect. So you would actually be filling out a criminal report and then they would be in the criminal justice system. So it kind of was not the outcome initially that they had wanted. So we brought that up, that maybe there's a different solution to that. Maybe we have some ability to talk to them and get a story before there's a need to contact an attorney. That got absolutely nowhere in both the House and Senate, absolutely nowhere. So both of them are what they call dead. Blake is probably the other really big one. And again, the support changed that. And I think the legislators absolutely believed and agreed and understand that there had to be a change. And so there's one bill left. It's SB 5536. Again, this was just as of last week, Friday, as a matter of fact. And what that does is prior to all the police reform and everything, it used to be a felony to possess certain narcotics. And what this bill does is it brings it down to a gross misdemeanor. That's okay, because the focus is on treatment, and that's what we always wanted. What law enforcement doesn't necessarily like about this are a couple things. One of them, in the way it's written right now, is local organizations, local cities and communities do not have the ability to pass an ordinance to restrict drug paraphernalia. So that is in the bill itself. They're looking for maybe a public health agency that can hand out drug paraphernalia, and they're working on that. There's going to be a work group on that. Another issue that we've kind of said that we weren't really supportive of, and you'll understand why, and that is what they consider safe supply. And what that is that's trying to find a safe way to distribute narcotics to people that use narcotics. And so we're working with that. They're going to develop a work group on that, and we're going to see where that comes. Good thing about this bill is, at least it's going forward, but that it repeals the two, if you will, warnings. So it is a gross misdemeanor, and we do have the ability to make that arrest. The bill that law enforcement supported, really it was either or. So you either went to treatment or you went to court and got convicted or went to trial. This one really, it's not either. They don't have to, if they don't want to go to treatment, they can go. What we're afraid of is this. We're afraid that they're going to say, yeah, okay, I'm in possession of it, and then they get 2 or 3 days in jail, whereas treatment takes 30, 60, 90 days. So we don't know if that's enough incentive for them to go get treatment. And that's what the focus should be, is the focus should be on treatment. And we don't know if that's enough leverage, if you will, to basically force them or motivate them to go get treatment. So we're back into that revolving door issue, and that's what we're fearful of. But we are at least in a better place than we were before this all takes place.
Chief?
Yes.
Just kind of as a practical matter, if they elect to go forward with treatment, who is paying for that?
That right now is in committee to decide where that funding is going through, but it's not going to be the local agencies. They're trying to get the funding through the state to be able to do all that. And they're going to set up treatment centers, and it's a big, big cost. But that is where it's at right now. Is in committee.
All right, thank you.
I did want to touch on one of the ones that concern me big, but it's going forward, but I don't believe that it's going to pass ultimately on the floor, and that is the traffic safety. And basically that's traffic stops for minor violations, non-movers, where if you see somebody with an unregistered vehicle or tail light out or something like that, you didn't have the authority to make that traffic stop. That has passed out of committee, but they don't feel that there's enough support for that to go forward. I think most of your legislators know that that's probably not a good idea to basically restrict law enforcement from making those kind of car stops. I think the last thing I'll talk about is actually I was watching the committee vote on Blake, and while I was watching that, our representative Bill Ramos had a bill forward, House Bill 1387. And what's interesting, and I talked about trying to influence legislation and influence how law enforcement does things and trying to improve what we do. And when this all started, I had a conversation with Representative Ramos about how can we how can we help law enforcement agencies hire quicker? How can we help them get qualified people and not have to wait for a year and a half to get them on the streets? And I said, you know, why don't we have the ability to, we need to have the ability to have somebody go through the academy that's not hired yet. In fact, that's how I went through. I went through unaffiliated and got hired. And we had a short discussion, it wasn't long, it was just ideas on how we can probably improve what we're doing now. Lo and behold, he wrote a bill out of that. And that bill was specifically what we had talked about, that they are developing a work group to look at how can we get unaffiliated people that aren't hired yet to have open spots in the academy and go through the academy and graduate and then have the ability to get hired by an agency. Yes, sir.
Would that help to avoid incidents like we had in Atlanta with the Tyree Nichols situation there? Because my understanding is that the officers involved there were not, they didn't go through the academy. They didn't get the level of training that most police officers get.
This is going to be completely different than that. There's a lot of issues with that, obviously. They're still going to have to go through the same academy with people that are hired. There's just open spots for those that are not hired yet. And why is that important? Why does that even matter? It matters because, like I said, if we hire somebody like we have hired somebody in October, he just started the academy last week. He now goes through an 18-week academy, 18-week FTO program. Literally, there's an 8 or 9 month wait for the academy. You're talking a year, 3 months to a year and a half before they're out on their own. Whereas my experience where I came from is if I needed officers, I would go to the police academy. There was people that were not hired there yet, interview them, and literally if they were graduating that week or that next day, which I usually timed it that way, they would be graduating from the academy. I could get them right into a quick background, right into an RFTO program. They could be out on their own in 18 to 20 weeks, instead of a year and 3 months to a year and a half. So it's a significant difference. It's a significant difference on our health and wellness of our officers right now, who are working 12-hour, 16-hour shifts day in and day out. And so it's far-reaching. And so to have that ability, I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but just the influence, the ability to listen, 263 mayors and council people sign a petition or sign a support letter, and how that makes a difference. And then a little discussion with the representative makes a difference. 9-0, it passed 9-0, which I was pretty amazed at that, to be honest with you. And so that's what I have on legislation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chief. Any additional questions?
Sounds like the chief's getting things done.
He
Thank
is.
you, man.
It's wonderful.
Slow but surely.
All right. So the next item we had were for the discussion items. It was the mental health professional. Did you want to talk about that today, or is that better to continue the next time since we only have about 7 minutes?
I think we can do that, whichever one you want. If you wanted to do the license plate readers, or if you want to do the mental health. I think mental health may be a little bit longer than that.
Okay, maybe let's touch back on the mental health professional at the next committee meeting then, please, and go
Just to
forward
touch
with.
base on that, we're going to start including that in our monthly report to the council.
Fantastic.
With the data for mental health professional, so you'll know how many contacts and what she's doing.
It's good to have good news to look at.
Yeah.
Always seems like it's good news.
Yeah. And Councilmember Benson, are you okay with doing license plate readers and pushing the other to the next?
Yeah.
session?
I'd rather save the mental health one for when Councilmember Watten's here.
Thanks.
So we've had this license plate readers on our discussion pending for quite some time. It has been kind of laying in wait, if you will, for probably years. Whether or not there was interest or not, I think there is interest. It's the tolerability of the community, whether or not they want to have license plate readers in their community. I'll tell you that the company that I've done research on for quite some time, and it's actually becoming very, very common in the Puget Sound area, called Flock. It's an interesting story how it started. It was just a gentleman who was looking into having a security system for his local HOA. And it was too expensive, and he decided, I think I can do it cheaper. In his garage, he did it cheaper, and he first marketed it just to HOAs and ROAs, and it became successful. Word got out, law enforcement started getting involved. It is huge. 3 years ago, I went to a conference, and they had a little corner area for a flock. I went there this year in Dallas, and it was huge. They probably had the largest area for that vendor show of any, and it was a 2-story huge thing. They're getting big. So I went up there, obviously giving them a hard time about now you're gonna be unaffordable and all those kind of things, but they're still very, very affordable. In fact, City of Medina just proposed 17 more cameras. They already have some, as well as Clyde Hill. In fact, between there at that community area, there's gonna be 57 cameras. They've leased, in this case, they leased 17 more, and it's $42,000 a year to do it. They install, it's a leasing program, the data, all the data goes into their server, and so, but it's really not just a license plate reader. If we have a description of a car and it says it's got on the back window this decal, it also can capture those decals or anything that's different about those vehicles. So not just the license plate doesn't read, it's really an amazing system. And then they, in turn, if a car comes into their city or is driving around and it gets captured, they get notified on their cell phone. And you can have that just be the chief, the captain, or the sergeant, or whoever who has authority to hit those. And they can tell, oh, the vehicle's at such and such a location. And because they have so many cameras, they can literally follow that car wherever it goes. And one thing that was interesting when I was talking to the chief was they found with the camera system that they had during the demonstrations in Bellevue when Bell Square was getting basically looted, they are adjacent, literally a couple blocks, Clyde Hill from Bell Square. They were getting nothing on their cameras because the bad guys knew, and they weren't going into their area, so they weren't able to assist with evidentiary photos and video and so forth, which was unfortunate, but it kept the bad guys out of their area. So yeah, they're very, very supportive, and the fact that they went and got 17 more just tells you that's testimony that, you know, that they know it works, and they're willing to put those in their community. I think it's, how do you go about doing that? You put that just in all the entrance, exit points of the city. That was the initial discussion that we had, because when car prowlers were coming into our community, they were from out of town typically, and we wanted to know who was coming into our town from 12 till 4 in the morning. Who is that? We have no ability of that right now. Whereas if we had 10 cars hit one night on a car prowl, we could go back to that video and find out, well, who was going in and out at that time. You have to have reasons to get on there. I just can't get on there and start checking, you know, people coming and going and so forth. So you do have to be aware of the big brother issue. That's kind of my proposal or my discussion on this, but I would like at some point to have a more in-depth discussion about, is this something that the council is interested in? Or I think the city administration has had interest in it for some time, but how does that look from a public safety perspective?
Yeah. Councilmember Benson.
I love that you brought up the big brother issue, because I think that's a real issue that, you know, people going about their daily lives shouldn't have to feel like they're constantly being surveilled. And I would love to hear more about how as a police department you manage not to become big brother, but rather to be police in situations where you need to be police. And I love that that's already on your mind.
Yeah, of course it is. I come here too. So obviously, yeah, and that's all about fairness and treating people equal. It's not about, you know, big brother looking at you. I'm not going to spend time on the computer looking who's coming and going. You really have to have a purpose, and that's things that we can put in place within the police department on policies and procedures of when you can and when you cannot do those kind of things, and then hold people accountable.
Yeah, I think that those conversations will be very important. As you know, I'm definitely interested in license plate readers. I do think that the privacy issue is an important one, and we'd probably need to get to circle in the city attorney as well. But yeah, I would love to explore that further. So, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
And with that, we are about out of time. So unless there's anything further, shall we adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll be your second, but I'm the only other person here. All right, thank you. The meeting's adjourned.